right, well, let's get this started, and I want to start with revisiting a little bit of news that we've already talked about a little bit, but maybe take a little bit deeper dive, maybe have some more context around now as things are starting to heat up. And Nick, let's start with Nick Martinez. We talked about it already, but he signs a $21.05 million qualifying offer to stay with the Reds for 1 year. When we talked about it, I think you were already pretty satisfied with the signing and the risk that the Reds took by extending that offer to begin with. But as you've seen some of these signings over the last couple of days, makes it seem maybe that wasn't such a stretch to begin with for those people that thought maybe it was an overpay for Nick Martinez.
Yeah, I was already in on Martinez, but when I saw some of these other signings from Frankie Montas and Matthew Boyd, I was like, oh yeah, wow, yeah, this was definitely no question the right move for the Reds. And I don't even fault some of these other signings, Craig, like Frankie Montas, 234. I think a lot of people that watched Frankie Montas last year and was a pretty average, maybe slightly below average starter for the Reds, pitched better in Milwaukee and probably overall had a pretty average season. I think people go, oh, that's such an overpay. I don't think the Mets did anything wrong. I've said a million times that I would much rather have guys on shorter term deals. So I'd rather overpay maybe in the eyes of the beholder on a short term deal than signing, Max Fried to 7 years, 150 million, something like that, and having a ton of risk. Whereas, these are short deals. But when you see that from Montes, see Matt Boyd, a guy who pitched really well for the Guardians, but hasn't stayed healthy for more than like 3 weeks at a time, getting $30 million from the Cubs. I mean, it just makes Martinez's deal, just really feel all the more valuable for the Reds. Craig, something I don't think we've acknowledged on this show, and I don't think a lot of people have acknowledged, Nick Martinez was second on the Reds in innings pitched last year. And the guy was in the bullpen for half the year. He still got 142 innings last year. And let's not forget, there was probably about 2 months of the season where there was this narrative, fair or not, that Martinez could not start. And it felt like the Reds were not starting him. David Bell, even remember, there was times where he was only using him in like 1 inning spurts, Craig. And he still ended up getting 142 innings. I almost think now you've mapped out a route with Martinez where if he goes back and forth, he can probably get more than 142 innings. But again, like these free agent guys like Matthew Boyd, you sure you're going to get 142 innings out of him, even if he's a starter all year? So that's where I think that you have to weigh all of the different ways he's going to impact winning, and all the innings that he can, really bring you in a multitude of different ways. And I know I'm rambling, but I was listening to the Reds Hot Stove League, and Jim Day said something really interesting on that. He said, and I'm assuming that he's, pretty well sourced on this matter. He said that the Reds are going to be more active in terms of load management with their pitchers next year. So it makes me think that maybe they're going to be a little more strategic with, giving guys like skipping a start with Andrew Abbott, or maybe using a 6-man rotation at times. And that also might be where you see Martinez's usage a lot more.
Well, and we're going to get into the rotation in just a couple of minutes, so I'll save that topic for when we get to that point. But you mentioned a couple of different signings that have happened over the last several days since we talked about Nick Martinez. I want to just point them out for those people that maybe didn't see them come across. Some of them happened for us recording this on Monday night, late last night on Sunday night, or into Monday morning. Frankie Montas, as you mentioned, goes to the Mets on a 2-year, $34 million deal. Matt Boyd, a 2-year, $29 million deal to the Chicago Cubs. And then a few days prior to that, Yusei Kikuchi signs a 3-year, $63 million deal with the Angels. You mentioned Matt Boyd specifically, but this is a guy who hasn't pitched in more than 15 games since 2019. He hasn't been able to stay healthy and be able to make an impact with the Guardians, even though he was a guy who many Cleveland fans wanted to keep in town and were hoping that the Guardians would be able to re-sign him. This is also a guy that got a start in the playoffs this past season, Nick. So, I mean, we're talking about a guy who obviously has good stuff, but when it comes to injury and availability, we've talked about it over and over again. the best ability is availability, and Nick Martinez has given you that in spades, not only in terms of being healthy, but being able to plug in wherever you need him. And so whether it is that Terry Francona decides that he's best out of the bullpen, whether he does continue to be a starter, whether he flexes back and forth, even at $21 million, I think he gives you value at that slot for you to be able to make determinations elsewhere in terms of how you manage that load. So, I'm interested to see Nick Martinez as you think about it, and you think about kind of the 2025 season upcoming, and obviously a lot of things can and will happen and go wrong over the course of the next several months. But let's say that you're kind of putting your GM hat on right now. As we sit today with the roster that the Reds have today, and maybe whatever plans we think the Reds may have, what are your expectations today for Nick Martinez?
Well, it's so in flux. It just depends on who's healthy on opening day. I mean, I think that's what it comes down to. I do not think, as we talk right now, Nick Martinez is slotted in as one of the Reds' 5 starters on opening day. And that's not necessarily because he's not one of the Reds' 5 best starters. It's because it gives them the most versatility. So I think if opening day started today, I think you have Hunter Green, I think you have Nick Lodolo, I think you have Brady Singer starting the opening series. Maybe Rhett Lauder gets that third game, the home game in front of the home crowd. I don't know if the Reds' second series is on the road or not. Sometimes it is. But then you have Abbott and Lauder finishing that rotation. But again, how many years do you get to opening day and you don't have anyone that's he had a slow start to camp. He's going to be 2 weeks into the season, right? Or he's just dealing with something minor. He just needs a little more time. Happens almost every single year. And then there'll be injuries that pop up throughout the year. You hope that you don't have to kind of throw Martinez into the rotation right away. But if you do, I mean, he's so valuable. And he can also just protect. There's so many of these guys that just none of these guys have pitched a full season. So he can, when maybe one of these pitchers are taxed, Francona and Derek Johnson, they can kind of strategically plan. All right, we know Rhett Lauder's a little taxed. Let's make sure we have Nick Martinez fresh for 3 innings on the next start for Rhett Lauder. And, you can kind of use him that way and really kind of maximize his innings. I think Burns will get into this rotation at some point. You look at Paul Skeens, that's your most optimistic outlook. Early May, you see him go in the rotation if he just goes to AAA and absolutely dominates. I don't think Burns is going to dominate the way Skeens dominated right away. I think it probably will take him a little bit more time, but you don't know. You really don't know. But I think he'll be up there at some point. And then Connor Phillips is just such a wild card. I don't really know about him. I have no expectations for Connor Phillips. Lyon Richardson and Carson Spires, they're break the glass in case of emergency. Options that are fine, but not anyone you want to count on. The real wild card here, Craig, though, is Graham Ashcraft. And that's kind of the most fascinating guy right now that I'm curious with how they're going to use him or not use him or trade him potentially this offseason. Because I think there's 3 things they could do with Ashcraft. I think they could trade him. Obviously, felt like at times maybe there was Graham Ashcraft maybe had some sour feelings towards the Reds after getting demoted, and then he had that injury and that second opinion, and the season just ended it in kind of a weird, unceremonious way. Is there maybe a bridge burnt where the Reds feel like, hey, look, we just need to move him. Other teams are going to be interested in a guy like Ashcraft with, his ability to throw a cutter at high 90s. Do they move him? Do they say, you know what? We still need pitching depth, because I really believe the Reds still need pitching depth. I still don't think they have enough. Do we just say, hey, Graham Ashcraft right now, we're going to pencil him in to start at AAA? I think if you're the LA Dodgers, that's what you would do. I think you would not even think about it. You'd be like, yeah, this guy is good depth. We'll start him at AAA. Or do they do the move I think a lot of people want them to do, and for relatively good reason and good thought process, is to move him to the bullpen? but it does feel like he could dominate. You have to really have a good gauge on Graham Ashcraft. I don't know, where do you sit on that, Craig?
Well, I mean, I just think there's so many different aspects that you kind of have to wait and see. I mean, I think you have realistically, as I sit today, I mean, there's a couple slots that are kind of up in the air still as you get into 2025 spring training, right? I mean, I don't think there's any world where Hunter Green isn't your opening day starter, assuming that he's healthy. I think we can agree on that. But beyond that, I think almost every spot is a question mark in terms of how it shapes out, right? That doesn't mean that there's not guys that you can expect to be in the rotation and certain guys that maybe you don't expect to be in the rotation. Brady Singer will be in the rotation, but will he be a 2 or will he be a 5? We just don't know those things yet. And we'll have to wait and see how that plays out. I don't know that anybody outside of Hunter Green has shown you enough to really have a firm grasp on a rotation spot for 2025 at this point. And I think there's still a lot of question marks that have to be answered in spring training for this team. And one of the things for me that I question about Graham Ashcraft, and you might know better than I do, is, Graham Ashcraft really struggled in the middle innings this past year. He was okay early on, and then as he got into that second and third time through the lineup is really when he started to struggle. In innings 1 through 3 last year, he had a 4.0 ERA, and innings 4 through 6, it ballooned up to 7.03. I wonder if there's not a role where Ashcraft can be kind of a regular opener, similar to what we saw out of Martinez and Suter last year, even Jacob Junis a little bit, and see if he can't fit into a role like that, where he's not necessarily coming directly out of the bullpen, but he's also not expected to pitch, like you were saying, 6-7 innings. You put him into situations where you can ask him to pitch 2-3 innings and then give other guys a rest. I think that makes a ton of sense. Between Rhett Lauder and Burns, certainly don't expect Burns to start in the majors, but I wouldn't be shocked to see him in the majors by the end of the year. I don't know what to expect out of Nick Lodolo at this point. And he's been, similar to Matt Boyd, who we talked about before, just injury prone and can't stay healthy. And when he is healthy, I think we all agree that he's got some of the best stuff that the Reds have, but he just hasn't been able to stay healthy and stay consistent. So, as I look at the rotation as it sits today, and I look at the pieces that are in place, I think Green is your opening day starter. I don't think there's a question there. I probably slot Brady Singer in as my number 2 today. Again, a lot to be kind of figured out over spring, but I probably slot Singer in as my number 2 today. Martinez might be my number 3. I give Lodolo my 4, and then you've really got a battle a little bit, but I kind of think that Lauder fits in as your number 5, which leaves you with Abbott, Ashcraft, Burns, Phillips, Richardson, even Spires as question marks for 2025. And I think that's a good problem to have, but the question is, given the question marks that each of those starters have, do the Reds need to go out and still add yet another starting pitcher to this equation for 2025, Nick? I wouldn't be shocked to see them go out and get a veteran who is looking for a 1 or 2 year prove it deal and see if they can't slot in there at a low risk, high reward kind of model. So is there a name out there that maybe would fit into that mode for you? Or does that mindset even make sense to you in terms of the potential needs to still add one more, maybe not consistent arm is probably not the right way to put it, but like proven arm, just someone that you can rely on at this point?
Yeah. The name that sticks out to me is Jacob Junis. I mean, that's the kind of pitcher that I want. Is I almost want a second Nick Martinez, because I think if everyone's healthy, you have a good 5, actually good 6 if you throw Martinez in there, or maybe even a good 7 if you have Burns in there. So I don't necessarily know if I really want to bring in another starter that I'm for sure gonna dethrone someone from their rotation spot, unless obviously if the Reds the Castellinis won the lottery and were able to increase payroll, by $150 million, then sure, go get another number one and we'll just move someone back. But in the real world, I just don't think that it pays off that way. Did Colin Ray end up becoming a free agent? I think, I can't remember. He's the kind of guy. He's the kind of guy, like he's kind of been a swingman. That's the kind of guy I'm thinking of. That I think makes the most sense for the Reds is just get another swingman or two. That's kind of what I'm thinking. But I guess what you said with Ashcraft, there's really 4 paths the Reds can take.
Yeah.
You have the trade. You have the keep him as a starter. Probably he starts in AAA. And I guess you have 2 different bullpens. You either try to make him just a high leverage arm where he just goes full out, max out for 1 inning, or he becomes more of that Jacob Junis, Colin Ray, Nick Martinez type. I don't know. I kind of think if you're moving to the bullpen, I kind of almost want to just say, give him the full arsenal, go all out for an inning. I kind of think if you're moving to the bullpen, make him like a legit reliever. That's kind of how I feel. But I'm really torn on Ashcraft. I really am, because I kind of feel like, man, he's had so many chances. Like, he just hasn't cut it. Like, let's just move him to the bullpen. Let's do something different. The guy only has 60 big league starts. And how many times have we saw pitchers, Craig, that had that narrative of, second, third time through the order, they couldn't. I mean, we even thought that about Nick Martinez at times last year, right? So, I don't know. That's where the Reds have to have a good pulse on him. Because I don't. I hope they have a much better pulse than I do.
Yeah, I look at some of, I'm on the free agent tracker and looking at guys and what they made last year. And, the guys like Wade Miley made 8.5. Alex Wood made 8.5. But then you get down, I mean, Patrick Sandoval made 5 last year. Michael Lorenzen 4.5. Colin Ray made 4.5 with Milwaukee last year. One name that kind of stood out to me, is there a world where we see a reunion with Mike Clevenger and Terry Francona as a name that gets looked at? There is a long list of free agent starting pitchers out there, many of which are going to be fairly affordable. Not that Spotrac is the end all be all, but they have Mike Clevenger's projected salary at $1.3 million. Like, there is going to be affordable arms where you can take that risk to bring a guy in. And if he pans out, he pans out. And if he doesn't, then so be it. I mean, it's no different than going out and signing a guy like Mike Ford last year, and you paid him $1.3 million to give you 10 days of work. So it'll be interesting to see kind of how they manage that. And I don't know. I think ultimately when I look back at it, I mean, I'm very happy with adding Singer. I'm obviously happy with the re-signing of Nick Martinez, but I don't think the Reds can be done and be content at this point with their rotation going into 2025.
As always, Chatterbox Reds is proudly sponsored by Deep South Commodities. DSC is a leader in renewable commodities for biofuel production, specializing in used cooking oil collection, aggregation, and sales. Visit www.deepsouthcommodities.com for more information. Thanks as always to our friends at DSC. We also want to remind you that you can call or text 988 anytime, day or night. The 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline is a place to get support for anything related to mental health. Whether it's an immediate crisis, simply wanting to find out how to connect with care, or anything in between, it's a 100% confidential, secure, and anonymous way to reach out for help when you don't know where else to turn. To connect, call or text 988 or visit mantherapy.org to get help. It's okay not to be okay.